You're listening to the Clutter Fairy Weekly, a weekly webcast and podcast brought to you by the Clutter Fairy in Houston, Texas. If you'd like to participate in one of our live webcasts, please visit cfhou.com/weekly. You'll find a calendar of upcoming webcasts, as well as instructions for joining the Zoom meeting via the app or by phone. We'd love to see you. That URL again is cfhou.com/weekly. Now here's the weekly episode. Enjoy.
Hi, Clutter Fairy fans. This is the Clutter Fairy Weekly for March 11th, 2025. I'm your co-host, Ed Gumnick, and I'm speaking with Gayle Goddard, certified professional organizer and owner of the Clutter Fairy in Houston, Texas.
Hi, everybody. The Clutter Fairy Weekly is the webcast and podcast that digs deep into the clutter that piles up between you and the life that you want to be living. We explore the habits and behaviors that lead to clutter, and we suggest strategies to slow the accumulation, reduce the collection, and comfortably manage the stuff we decide to keep.
If you're new to our Zoom meeting, we want to let you know that you can share your comments and questions via the chat feature, and I'll try to make sure Gayle addresses them before we move on to another topic. You can also use the raise hand feature if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment yourself via audio or video. And we are probably going to make a lot of use of that today because we want to hear from anybody who wants to chime in on their experience of the book. That is our main topic today.
Right.
We're also streaming the webcast live on Facebook, so you can share your questions and comments there, and I'll relay them to Gayle. We're going to start by recapping last week's weekly tittle, which was called Plan a Paper Project. The assignment was to apply principles that we talked about in last week's show to plan a project to address your worst paper challenge. Let's hear from our participants in Zoom and on Facebook who piloted their prototype paper project this week. I promise I'm finished with the alliteration now.
You love to let that rip, don't you?
Alliteration is so much more fun when it's the letter P for some reason. Please let us know in the comments. While we wait for our live audience to chime in with tittle reports, I want to share part of a comment from YouTube viewer Persephone. Persephone very generously shared her experiences with using paper management techniques and systems from several organizing experts who she mentions in those comments. And she included lots of links in the two comments on our video last week, from last week. I encourage anyone who's still looking for a paper handling system to take a look at her suggestions. Here's a small excerpt. Cass Arson, Dawn Madsen, and Dana K. White agree that getting your incoming paper under control changes your perspective on your backlog of old paper. They strongly recommend waiting on the backlog until you've been working on the active stuff for some months. Gayle, what do you think of that advice?
I think that makes perfect sense. Getting the fire hose of incoming paper turned off makes your backlog project a finite one. Controlling the incoming paper means you stop growing the piles any bigger, and that can only help you tackle the backlog as a project. No one wants to feel like they're pushing the river back. So stopping the backlog from growing by getting a handle on the new paper coming in stops that feeling and gives you a finite project to plan. I think it's really good advice. And I appreciate being in the company of such, renowned authors. Thank you very much.
Yes. Kara says, I went through the insurance file and got rid of outdated policies.
Yay, that's some low-hanging fruit. Good job. And they're always fat and easy to get rid of.
Right. There was also a commenter on YouTube, and I'm just gonna have to paraphrase this one because I didn't save it, but someone said, I like to save the old policies so that I can compare, can see how the premiums have changed over time, but then I never actually do that.
I know, right?
Which I thought was that was kind of a fun telling on herself or himself.
Right. And, I've heard other people do that, and it's like, I'm not sure what information that gives you other than to show you that prices are rising over time. Like, of course, prices are rising over your lifetime. That what you paid when you were 20 will not be what you pay when you're 40. That it's going to be different. And so I'm not sure why people feel like that's a useful thing to know other than to torture themselves for how much more expensive it is.
It's not exactly going to arm you for a conversation with your insurance agent to
Yeah,
say,
yeah.
last year this cost less money. What's up with that?
Well, right. And then the agent is going to be like, yeah, and the prices have changed. Like, yeah, I don't understand the inclination to do that because it doesn't give you any bargaining strength
Yeah,
to know what you paid 5 years ago
or
on
really,
an insurance policy.
yeah, or actionable. It's not really
Mhm.
actionable information. It
Yeah,
it
yeah,
may
yeah,
be
yeah. That's
it may be interesting to you,
anecdotally interesting, but it
but
doesn't help you.
if it's interesting and also, frustrating and annoying and or, infuriating, you're kind of, you know, shooting yourself in the foot.
Right? Yeah, that's just my thought.
May reports I started reading the book Goodbye Things, but got sidetracked with purging paperwork.
Hey, that's okay. We do not care that you went and worked on your paper. That is a fabulous thing. So good job. If that prompted you to go get rid of some paper, there you go. And you can take a break and go read another chapter and go back to the paper.
Julie reports I decluttered last year's tax files.
Yay, that's a good one. That's a very good one. Put some things in shredding, I hope.
M says something happened on my computer, which has been flooding it with junk mail every day. I've spent hours going through, unsubscribing, and
Oh,
blocking them. Oh, that's so frustrating.
I know that is super frustrating. I'm sorry you're having to do that. That's a bummer.
Let's see. Anita says I went through my old tax files and moved 3 years down to the basement file and got rid of 3 years. I'm also completely ready for my tax preparer on Thursday. What a relief.
Oh, da 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 da. We are all clapping for you. Yay. That's always a good thing. And it sounds like you did the annual shuffling of the files and then got ready for your tax accountant. So you can be feeling particularly smug this week
That's
because
right.
you're ready.
Right?
Good job. We will support you in your smugness right now.
Jade says I decluttered a carry-on size bag of paper and books.
Ooh, that's a good one. Because that mentally a carry-on size is that's a big stack. So good job.
And Bella says virtual declutter just went through 4,500 emails,
Wow.
switched accounts to a new email address. My university is taking away alumni access to our email address.
Mm.
My friend has 450,000 emails. This is over 15 years. Feels accomplished to have deleted or forwarded emails. Now I don't want to sit at my computer for a month. LOL.
I'm not surprised to hear that. I'm not surprised you burnt yourself out a little crispy trying to get rid of 4,500 emails. That's a lot. But good job. Good on you. And if you had to do it in one big sitting like that, that's okay. You still accomplished something really fabulous and you'll recover and you'll go back to your computer again. It'll you may want to set yourself a task reminder to go and work on it again before you get to 4,500. Like maybe you want to trigger when it gets to 800 or 1,000 and then you go do the work. And so that it's a quarter of the work that you just did. Um,
Less overwhelming.
less
Yeah.
onerous, less overwhelming. So there you
Okay, I
go.
think we should cut off our tittle reports there because we have prepared a lot to talk about on this book
On
today.
Mr. Fumio.
Yes, we have. So let's go right to it. In Goodbye Things, author Fumio Sasaki shares his personal story of becoming a minimalist. The book also offers lots of tips for saying goodbye to stuff and explores the results of Sasaki's profound change in lifestyle. Today, we're going to share our thoughts on Goodbye Things and discuss lessons we can take from this popular book about a minimalist approach to decluttering.
Welcome to the official kickoff of the Clutter Fairies Book Club. We've covered two books before on this webcast, Swedish Death Cleaning and Marie Kondo's The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. But we've not named it a book club before today. Since we have plans for other books after this one in the future, we've decided to name this segment Going Forward. Frankly, we're hoping that we're not the only ones in the Zoom room who read the book, so we can get your take on the book today. If you read it in time for the show, if you read it in time for the show, thank you for the extra effort to participate in our show. We appreciate you so much for that. And if you didn't read the book, maybe our conversation today will intrigue you enough to read it later. Ed has read this book before, but it was my first time to read it. And I feel like I need to give a short book report first. So here we go. The author, Fumio Sasaki, wrote a book that I found easy to read. And as an organizer, I related to a lot of the tips that he gave for letting go of stuff. He made his case for a minimalist lifestyle based on his own experience and his own results. And as I read it, he tells his readers he pared down his belongings until they were no longer a bother, no longer overwhelming, no longer a distraction. He stopped when he had what he uses right now and nothing else. And when he was done, he could clean easily every day, find everything he needed immediately. He knows exactly what he has, and he can move in 30 minutes. Like literally, he can move from one apartment to another in 30 minutes. He can live in a much smaller space, and it's not always trying to buy more stuff. So he can earn less money in order to live well, which is great. And as a result, he feels unburdened, released from the weight of his things, and he focuses on his experiences and the people in his life instead of his stuff. And he considers that a vast improvement in the quality of his life. Now, he's single and childless, living in a city. He's living in an urban environment. So his needs are different than some of the readers, some of our audience members that are reading. He has faster access to anything that he needs because he's in a city, and he can afford to replace something when he runs out. So his reduced earnings are still sufficient for him to cover his living expenses, and the very reduced level of stuff he has on may be a hard target for someone who is married with kids at home, like how the little amount of stuff that he keeps wouldn't work for
Wouldn't be
someone with
sufficient for a
more, yeah,
household.
with
Yeah,
more people in the
yeah.
family, right? But the book's concepts don't require you to reduce your stuff to his item count, his specific item count to be still effective. His tips on letting things go and the questions to ask yourself about your stuff also apply for anyone at any stage of giving things away. I think the best reason to read this book is to see how he changes the way he sees the stuff in his life. He changes his mind about the reasons to own something and what he actually needs to live comfortably. And he sees a change in his level of happiness overall after he completes paring down. He actually goes for the same thing we talk about every week. He can comfortably manage the things he's decided to keep, and he finds many rewards and happiness from his life as a result. So, my advice is not to read the book as a blueprint for what you have to do personally. You don't have to do exactly as he does in terms of the number of belongings or what types of things he gives away. Read it to notice how he changes the way he sees his things and how he just goes about deciding what can go and what needs to stay. The tips on how to let go of things apply no matter how much you have or how much you let go. And then pay attention to the way he remembers to be grateful every day. That's something in the book that anyone can apply to their own situation. So that's the end of my book report.
I think that was very good. I am ready to give you an A+ on your
Oh,
book report
thank you. My first book report in decades. There
in
we
quite a
go.
while.
Right? So we sent out a survey on the book, and you gave us some great thoughts as always. So let's go through your points of view on this book next.
Okay, we started by asking our audience what useful decluttering or organizing strategies or methods did you take away from the book? And Denise said, being a saver, it really hit me that when you discard, you gain more than you lose. You gain time. I spend a lot of time managing clutter. Space, energy, what you gain is really limitless. Removing what is not currently needed is the best thing you can do for yourself. Removing stuff isn't wasteful at all. Keeping it is.
And this is an example of pivoting your thinking in a new direction. You're now thinking that what you've done before, saving stuff, is really more wasteful than removing stuff. And that's a keen insight to gain. Totally worth reading. And it totally shifts how you process the things in your life and what you decide to keep and let go of. I bet that as you filter with this new insight, the amount of stuff that you let go is vastly going to change, and you're going to see a big difference in your environment going forward.
Okay,
Coming,
Cynthia says the part that impacted me the most was just seeing the final result of extreme minimalism.
he has definitely gotten to an extreme level of surrender. It's a little like living as a college student almost. He lives in a small space. He manages to live, dress, eat, and work with a small quantity of things, and he's comfortable. I wouldn't do it to his level, but I see how the extreme reduction in stuff really changes his view of life and of himself. And it really sounds like he's living like a college student again. And it works for him. It totally works for him.
Allison says we need to we need I want to say we need to include some contrary points of view. So I've taken pains to
Right?
do that. And I'm going to throw in a few of my own as we go along too, because
Okay.
although
Do you have an
um
opinion?
I enjoyed the read, there were a lot of things that like set off little red flags for me. But let's
Mm.
go to Allison's comment. Allison said, I wanted to say from the start that I really, really, really hated this book. Absolutely hated it. There was nothing useful at all for me. That said, Sasaki's observation that you can let go of something may lead to a chain effect, such as his letting go of the TV led to decluttering game consoles, DVR, etc., might be handy for someone else.
Allison, thank you for reading the book, even though you hated it so much. I'm just grateful that you could extract something to share with others. I'm sorry that his lists of letting go techniques weren't really helpful for you, but I appreciate that you made the effort to read the book. Thank you so much.
I want to take a moment right now to repeat my invitation from the start to anyone who, you know, read the book and wants to comment on the particular questions and or other people's and would like to speak or be on video, please feel free to chime in at any time. Um, let's see. Melissa said, I like the question, if you lost it, would you buy it again? And of course, the one in, one out rule, or two or more out if you are minimizing. I really like his take on the psychological and emotional side of clutter, especially the idea that when you clear the space of unnecessary things, your thoughts become clearer. I even sleep better.
I've always said that your things chatter at you and take up a lot of mental space that's distracting you. My clients say all the time that it seems quieter to them when the stuff isn't there to bother them anymore. And I think we become numb to the amount of noise that the stuff around us is making and the amount of mental effort we're putting into ignoring. I need to clean, I need that project. I need to work on that project. I need to clear up that area. It's bothering me. That's a project I'm ignoring. We put a lot of energy into continuing to ignore or trying not to notice. And you don't have any way to compare until the project is complete, the stuff is done, the thing is organized how you wanted it, and it stops making noise at you. You don't really have any way to know how loud it's become until it finally turns itself off because you've done what you wanted to do about it. And I think it's a valid point. And I also, she mentions if you lost it, would you buy it again? I think that's a really good question. There's a lot of things that you can put in your hand and look at it and go, if I lost this, if I lost track of this, and would I buy it again? Would I feel like it was necessary for me to go and replace this? And I bet, at least 8 out of 10 times the answer would be no. And if you wouldn't buy it again anyway, then why are you keeping it now? Like that's a really good way to filter. If it's
Right.
not worth replacing, then is it really worth your time to manage the one that you have? Like you can probably live without it, and you probably have other ways that you like better to cope with whatever this item is supposed to address. So
Yeah.
it's a good
And
question to filter with.
that really gets at the point that Rowan has mentioned in talking about this book in previous shows
Mm.
about Rowan was one who recommended this book, so thanks to Rowan for that. Um, the point about need, what is really need, and the question, if you lost it, would you buy it again? I think is a good discriminating factor to identify real need,
Yeah,
because it's
what
like,
you
well,
need or
yeah,
not.
I would go buy it again because I use it every day. I rely on
Hmm.
it. It's an essential part of this
My daily
system or
functioning. Yeah.
process or functioning in my house. So yeah, I would. Okay, let's see. Sandra says that what she took from Goodbye Things was validation that I was doing the right thing in minimizing the volume of things I keep.
Reduction in volume of any collection subset that you own, the towels, the dishes, the shoes, the kitty cat tchotchkes, while still keeping some towels and some dishes and some shoes and some tchotchkes can only help while still keeping your variety of interests. We don't have to collect without cease to a volume that becomes unmanageable. We can keep a certain number of shoes that we like and not have 200 pairs. So there, that idea of just focusing on minimizing the volume of the categories of things that you keep is a great way to sort of apply the a minimalist concept to what you live with. And Sandra's point is a very good one.
Yeah. Rowan, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. One thing I want to stress about the book is that Mr. Sasaki doesn't advocate that one lives like he lives.
Mm.
Right.
And I think that's a confusion because sometimes you read books and it's like you think the author is advocating that you should live the way they live, and he doesn't advocate that at all. And he also does not advocate counting your stuff. Like, and he
Yeah.
says just because you can put everything in a backpack doesn't necessarily mean you're a minimalist.
Right,
And
right. I
so
mean,
I wanted to, I wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Rowan. And I do actually, because you wrote that in the survey somewhere, and we do reference that later on too in a different in response to a different point. So we'll circle back to that. But it is he's telling his story with his own experience, which is the only, like he can only come from his point of view and what his journey was like. But then he also makes a broader point about how you can apply that to the stuff that you own and not necessarily end up with the very minimal collection that he has. That's, he implies that that's the level that makes him happy, and that's the level that makes him feel in control, and that's the level that makes him feel like, he can manage his surroundings and his stuff and focus his attention on more rewarding things besides keeping up with his things. And so um, he's saying that's the level that he had to go to feel in control and feel like it was manageable and not a distraction. But he's not defining that level for you and what is important for you, what your level would be.
okay, I want to share a comment and then we'll go on to the second question on our survey.
Okay.
Beth says, Gail and Ed's virtual background. I think we need to acknowledge that there's a difference between the minimalist mindset of owning only what we need and the minimalist aesthetic, which actually seems more like a marketing ploy. Makes us think we need to go out and buy the furniture with clean lines and neutral colors and decor items that fit that modern look that is associated with minimalism on social media. One more comment. Linda says, old retired librarian here who has read the book and gives Gail an A plus on her book report. The book helped me shift my mind in a very positive direction.
Thank you. And I'm sure that Mr. Sasaki would be thrilled to know that it was a positive experience for you. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing.
Okay,
Got to know when the library gives you an A plus. That's a good thing, right?
yes. Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah.
Ooh, thank you.
All right, let's go on to question number 2 from our survey, which was, what parts or aspects of the book did you find difficult to grasp or challenging to apply to your home or situation? This will be our most contentious question, I think.
Yeah.
Gabriella says, say goodbye to who you used to be. Even though I've changed over the years, there are aspects of me that have remained the same and which I want to keep, as well as sparse numbers of items representing this part of my identity. An example is my playfulness, which I enjoy and cherish. Of course, in other aspects of my life, I've let go of things, ways of living, and attitudes, but I choose which ones to let go of or which to keep. I am aware, however, that on another level, the past and the future are more mere representations in our mind and only the present exists.
Well, and I think, saying goodbye to who you used to be isn't a directive to release everything that you used to be. And you're describing the fact that you are playful still. That's not who you used to be. I mean, it's not only who you used to be, it is also who you are now. And so that wouldn't be something that I think he would be expecting you to release. I'm thinking of, we go through transitions in our life, and maybe you used to be a soccer player and now you don't anymore, or maybe you used to be a PTA mom and now your kids are grown and gone, or maybe you used to be into ballroom dancing and you don't do that anymore. Like there's aspects of our lives that have a season, and then the season passes, and then we move on to the next season and do something different. And so I think that he's more describing letting go of the version of you that is no longer active in your present anymore. And so those things that you used to do, those jobs that you used to have, those people that you used to know, the events that you used to go to, maybe you were somebody that did a lot of Renaissance festivals and you used to go and get all dressed up and you don't do that anymore. Well, so that would be an example of, you had a season in your life where that was important, and then your life has evolved to another stage. And so letting go of those stages that aren't who you are now is reflected by letting go of the objects that remind you of that old version, that old project, that old job, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's a way for you to filter your stuff by recognizing who you are now and keeping the things around you that support who you are now. And we've said this before ourselves. Keep what supports who you are now and release the things that support a version of you that no longer is active. The part of you that's playful and the things that support you in that, stay. And the version of you that isn't around anymore, the things that you used to do that you don't do anymore, release the stuff that, did you used to do roller skating, and now you don't anymore, you could let the roller skates go. That's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. It's a
Okay.
way to filter.
Let me share just one more comment, or a couple more comments actually.
Okay.
Um, let's see, I lost it. There's a lot going on in the chat. M says, I did not like the book, but listened to it over and over, fascinated with the glimpse into his mind and life, to which I could not relate. And then she goes on to say, to find the follow-up, she goes on to say, I'm glad I read the book, even though I could not relate and was shaking my head in disbelief over his reasons for having bought too much stuff. It really helped me understand why some of my friends have so much.
There you
And
go. So it gave you an insight into um, other people that you know that you can't relate to already.
yeah,
That's cool.
and this is great insight into why I wanted to us to start covering books on a regular basis, because I think, even a book that doesn't resonate with you, you learn things from it. You learn about yourself, you learn about the author, you learn about what other people are thinking with different experiences. Um,
And she's describing that she's gained empathy for her friends from this thought process, right?
right,
Like
right.
she was able to extrapolate and give that grace to her friends, which I'm sure her friends can only appreciate her for. So I'm
Yeah.
sure they're very thankful for that. So thank you for reading the book, even though you didn't enjoy it, but it sounds like you got something out of it that helps you relate to your friends better. And so that's a benefit for you, I think.
Sandra says the challenge is to keep the book in its proper perspective. The author is single with no kids. He rents a small apartment and he lives in a large city where everything is available. This is much different from living in a rural area in a large house where I raise my children and many pets.
Sure, with a larger family, results may vary, but the concepts that he describes can be applied to a larger cache of things, allowing you to pare down to a level that works for your larger family and your more complex living requirements. I mean, it totally, we keep circling around this. It's absolutely not that you would want to try to make your large family in your area, in your rural area, look like, get down to the level of stuff that he has, because
Right.
he doesn't have as many people to manage. So totally not the same. But the ideas of paring down to what is currently used by your family and not keeping a lot of excess, can still be extrapolated and to your situation.
All right, let's see. Catherine says she didn't appreciate the suggestion to store all pics in the cloud. I think a couple of people made similar comments.
They didn't like that one.
Yeah, the idea that that's the only place that your photographs live is
Mm,
a little
making some
uh
people twitchy.
yeah, yeah.
That's okay. He
Well, I
handles
mean,
his
because
photos to that, but
you're committing yourself to a subscription to your cloud storage service forever,
right.
or to a project somewhere down the line where you're going to have to download it all to media of your own, and that's fairly off-putting to people who may not be as just as into technology as Fumio Sasaki.
Right. I mean, it's a
Yeah,
100% digital extreme solution, right? And not
yeah,
everybody wants to go there. So you don't have to go that far, but you can still reduce your loss exposure by backing up important photos to a secondary system of whatever type, just to insulate yourself from tragic loss, fire, flood, that kind of stuff. So
yeah.
clearly he is all in on the tech solution, and he does not want the photos laying around. He's perfectly happy to pull them up on the computer and look at them. And so that works for him. But if you want to have the paper, if you want to have the picture hanging on the wall, that's okay. Again, you're just looking at volume reduction here, and he takes it to an all digital extreme, but you don't have to go that far.
Yeah. Melissa says her objection was to the idea that you'll never regret letting go of something. We can all make mistakes. Also, the extreme lengths he goes to, I like the idea of minimizing my stuff, but not to the extreme of having one plate and a spork, spoon/fork in one.
He did say that he had repurchased a foot massager after he let it go once, which I thought was fun. For him, that was a mistake that he recovered from by rebuying it. And he has a small space and it has needs for one person, but you can set your own threshold for what level of stuff is appropriate in your life. And so the idea of having one plate and a spork doesn't have to be your goal. You can come down to
I'm
something less than that.
I'm going to share one of
I
my
mean, more than that.
one. I'm going to share one of the things that just made me have a WTF moment while I was reading.
Okay.
And I reacted that way when I read the book the first time some months back. And then as I was reading, I was thinking, I can't wait till I get to that part and see if maybe I just misread it. But no, here's the quote. I recently got rid of all the towels I have at home and switched to a single tenugui, a thin Japanese hand towel. It's amazing. It can be used in many ways, and you'd be shocked by how quickly it dries. I use it, leave it hanging, and it's dry the next time I need it. I use it to wash my hands, do the dishes, and dry my body after taking a shower. Well, I read that and I was kind of horrified because,
I know,
I don't
right?
care. I don't care
That was
if
a little
you
off-putting to me.
I don't care if you get in the shower and use boiling water and bleach. You're still an animal, and your towel is going to have skin cells and hair and body, bodily secretions and oil and sweat. And
Yeah.
no, no, no,
No.
no. You need at least two towels. You need a body towel and a dish towel, and
Yeah, like separate
these things
functions
should
do
never
not.
overlap in my universe.
Right? Like at least buy two of those towels and put one of them in the bathroom and one of them in the kitchen. Like, right? Yes, and funny thing, I was just thinking that this morning again when I got up. I was just like, yeah, that whole one towel thing does not work for me.
No.
That was a problem.
Mm-mm,
And
mm-mm.
exactly for that reason, because I felt like, oh, that is some cross contamination, brother man, that you as a man are not thinking hard about right now. Like,
Yeah.
ew, right? It felt like a very boy way to respond to a towel. and
Okay.
I'm in my meanderings and in my thinking about it, I was like, I sure hope you put that towel in the laundry
Right. I
constantly.
was gonna
Like you
say,
better be watching that thing all the time.
you must wash and dry this towel 4 times a day. Okay,
right?
let's
Like,
go on.
ooh.
Allison says Sasaki continually extrapolated his personal experience to everyone else. And then she gives some examples. We're desperate to convey our own worth, our own value to others. We use objects to tell people just how valuable we are. Page 69. And then I was desperate to convey my worth through my books. Page 75. Okay, just because he was deeply insecure doesn't mean the rest of us are. I have few books because I like them, not to impress anyone.
And I read this as him saying books were a way that he tried to impress others. It's just an example, though. We all have things in our lives that are there to make us feel more together or better somehow. And clearly, books are not your specific clutter issue. But I can see the logic in the statement that some of what we buy is to compare ourselves to and to try to look good to others. And if you can release that expectation, then you can release some of the things that you own that might otherwise seem essential to you. If they're really just there to help you look better to others, then maybe that's not a good enough reason to keep them and you can release some of those. I think that's more of where he's trying to go. It's not specifically about, get rid of the books. And if you don't
Well,
have that issue about the books, then great. If you don't have, clearly he had way too many books for the space that he was living in, and he was completely overloaded, and getting rid of them and finding a way to release them was necessary for him to not be drowning in the apartment in books. And I think, he figured out his way that he could let them go. And there you go.
and I think I'm gonna be brief because I want to move on to the next question, but
Mm,
I'm kind of team Allison on that one. I did feel like that he did a lot of projection, a lot of this is how I used to be, and so this is how I think people are.
mm,
And I would say that I'm not consciously aware of ever having bought something to impress other people. You know,
okay.
I'm very much of a utilitarian. It's like I don't buy something unless it's really useful to me or so beautiful to me that I just want to have it around to look at all the time, you know?
Right, right, right.
And I mean I realize there are you we may be two two extremes on the same spectrum, you know.
Right, right, exactly.
Okay, one more on this topic. Suzanne says, having the absolute minimum would not bring me joy, but I like that it's possible for others. I'm a homeowner with a large yard. My enjoyment comes from having family and friends over where we cook, eat, play, and we use actual books, puzzles, games, sewing, gardening, have pets, go through 4 seasons ranging from 40 Celsius down to minus 40 Celsius. We enjoy a different lifestyle, and our environment, ages, financial, and family situation differ from the author's. I understood the author's message as this is what I had and how I lived, and this is how I changed, how I now live, and how I make it work for me. Written from a single man living in a small urban apartment who seeks community and entertainment outside of his residence,
Mhm.
relying heavily on the digital world. Um,
Exactly. And your focus is, I mean, you're stating that your focus is more about the family and friends in an analog way in your own environment, in your own house, as opposed to outside of the house.
right.
And
In a lively, active household full of people. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And
Okay.
so, yeah, those are definitely opposite ends of the spectrum.
Our third question was, please share your favorite quotations or key takeaways from this book. Allison, who hated the book overall, says her key takeaway was the emphasis on gratitude at the end of the book.
I think that was a very relevant part of the book. I thought too. It pointed out how feeling gratitude for our things helps us continue to see them as valuable and worth using, even when they've gotten familiar and not as special feeling as when we first bought them. And truly coming from a grateful state of mind just feels better than feeling negative all the time. It's a better way to interact with your stuff if you're able to do it from a point of gratitude. And so I thought that was a really important part of the book as well. And it doesn't show up until the very end. So you go through all that stuff and then you get the discussion on gratitude at the end.
Okay, let's see. Ginger shared this quote, "Be quick to admit mistakes. They help you grow. When we experience shopping mistakes like this, it's better to get rid of the item sooner rather than later. It isn't healthy to spend any more time with an item that signals failure to you.
Mhm.
Instead, it's try to recognize and learn from our mistakes as soon as we can so we can make a smarter choice the next time around."
I completely agree with Ginger here. There's no point in keeping something that is mocking you from the corner of the room. Hiding it in the house doesn't stop the mocking feeling either. You know, if you go stash it under the bed or stick it in the closet, back of the closet, you know it's back there and it's still mocking you anyway. As
Ginger was
Gin,
actually quoting from the book, so
right,
so
right.
it's Sasaki you're agreeing with, not Ginger. I
Well,
mean,
well,
although Ginger
Sasaki and
endorses the
Ginger,
comment, yes.
right? And as Ginger says, accept the buying mistake, release it, and move on. It's like buying a meal that you didn't like very much. It was a mistake, and there's nothing to do but throw it away and try something else. And I think um, because it's a physical object and not usually a consumable object, we tend to think that, you know, we have to go park it in the corner. But I think as soon as you figure out that it's not going to work, it's not the right thing, whatever was wrong with it, I bought the wrong size, I bought whatever. Do what you need to do to send it away. If you know it immediately and you can return it, great, and get your money back, fabulous. And if you can't, send it on. Don't let it live there with you and mock you. It isn't going to change the fact, like 2 weeks from now or 2 years from now, it's not going to be any less of a mistake than it was when you figured out that it was a mistake. So you might as well just accept that part, release it, and move on so that it's not in the house mocking you anymore. And we all waste money on weird and stupid things. And so there's no reason to be more annoyed that you bought something and it was the wrong thing than, you know, you bought that dress and it was the wrong size, or you like, there's no reason for that to be more of an annoyance than anything else any other ways that we waste money. So
Yeah.
don't worry about it. Release it and let it go. I think that's a good point.
All right. Gabriella shared two quotations that resonated with her. "What if you started from scratch?" Provides food for thought and an invitation to a Gedanken experiment, thought experiment. Minimalism is a method and a beginning. Although I believe that minimalism is only one among a multitude of other methods and ways to begin.
Of course. Of course it
And
is.
and let me, oh, you want to comment
Go
on that?
ahead.
Or okay, I was going to say, let me move on to another because really want to get to the last two questions. I don't want to miss
Okay.
these. So one more here. C says, "Your things are not you. The less things, the less cluttered thoughts. You can enjoy life more if not focusing on things sitting around in sight or in the way of everyday life."
That's absolutely the message we've been trying to send out all along. You can be happier with your life if your things are not getting in the way of your life. Your things are not your life, they're just things that exist in your space. And that's the shift in thinking that your things are not you, is the shift in thinking that we're hoping to help you get towards. So thanks for pointing it out, Z.
Yeah, and there are things that exist in your space to support your life. It's not
Mm-hmm.
yeah, if they don't support your life, that's what we want. That's what we want you to let go of.
Right.
Okay, our next question was, when you hear the word minimalism used to describe a lifestyle, what do you think of? And how has reading Goodbye Things informed or changed your ideas about minimalism? And Rowan says, "I think I first thought of it as an aesthetic or living out of a backpack. But I think the important thing is that I don't feel Sasaki is advocating that everyone live as he lives, or even that everyone should be a minimalist, more that everyone should examine their stuff, while saying that probably most of our stuff hinders rather than supports our current life."
And I agree with you on that, Rowan. He tells this story about how he became a minimalist and what he gained from the process, but he mostly tells that journey as a way to explain that we keep more than we need to enhance our lives, and we actually keep stuff that detracts from living our lives well and happier. His version of dealing with that was to reduce his things to a very bare level, but anything along that continuum of aiming to keep only what supports our current lifestyle is the goal that he's advocating there.
Leela says, "Minimalism sounds freeing to me because I'm the one who repairs and maintains 90% of the items our family owns. The book makes minimalism sound more appealing to me. I wish I could pack up everything for a few weeks and try it. And I want to give credit to Leela and actually Gabriella who talked about the what if you started from scratch thought experiment. That's a flash forward to our tittle for today, which we'll give you in just a
Right.
few minutes. Let's
By the
see.
way.
Christine says, I think minimalism is a concept that only the wealthy can afford, so I dislike the word. She
Hmm.
says, I think the New York Times did a whole article on this. I didn't find a New York Times article, but I found an article in The Guardian that was talking about, is minimalism for the wealthy. Christine goes on to say, having had a career and therefore needing different clothing, having raised children and handled all their stuff, and having owned a house, one half of the stuff in my house is just to keep the house functional and not personal to me. Not having a large income, I cannot afford to replace most items, so it takes a lot more supplies and time and storage just to keep things in good repair. There was when I went looking for the New York Times article, I found there's a very lively discussion on the internet about minimalism and whether it is sort of a conceit of wealthy people in developing, developed countries, or I should say advanced countries,
Mm-hmm.
and then on the flip side of that, lots of answers from minimalists saying, no, this is a more realistic way to live in the world, or a way to live in the world that is closer to our roots.
Well, and
and,
I
and
think the important thing that he talked about money related to in this book was the idea that he could reduce his income. He could live comfortably on a reduced income because he wasn't buying as much. He didn't have to have as large of a space to store things, and that he was reusing things and not spending money excessively to add to his collection of stuff. And
right.
so it felt like a how to minimize my impact kind of a discussion from a financial standpoint for me as he talked about how he changed his income because of it. He didn't have to earn as much money. And so I wouldn't say that he's wealthy. Like, well, he may be wealthy after the sales of this book, but when he wrote the book, he wasn't wealthy, right? And so, and
Right.
I think from that standpoint, he was reducing his financial impact while he was reducing his stuff, and I think that there's something to be said for that.
I do want to share one comment from Suzanne now. Suzanne says, this is back on, there's a very lively discussion of the towel issue
The
in
towel
the chat.
incident.
And Suzanne says, he probably got another towel after publication,
Right.
especially if he wanted any women to come over to the house.
If he ever wanted anyone to come in there again, right? Like, because I wouldn't be wiping my hands on that towel after I went to the bathroom in his house. I'm just saying,
Right.
you know.
Um, Connie says, we wouldn't have many of the most famous museums if people didn't collect things, including useless things.
Mm,
I like that.
that's
That's
true.
and that actually goes to one of my reactions to the book was I really what he said about, our brains are 50,000-year-old computers makes a lot of
Yes.
sense. And we have talked here before about, you know m- I've expressed my personal theory that, clutter started as soon as we had opposable thumbs. As soon as we could hold things and keep things,
Yeah.
we started collecting clutter. And evolved our brains evolved under conditions of scarcity,
Mm-hmm.
when we had to, we if we
Struggle to eat
found
every day.
if we had found a good supply of food, we wanted to hold on to it because we didn't know when we'd find the next good supply of food. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
it's just a very natural part of how we came to be, that we want to hang on to stuff. But at the same time, we're also, the animals that have figured out how to communicate with one another through complex forms, language and mathematics and
Mm,
science and, all the and technology, and
right.
art. And so it's a very natural thing to want to make and share and keep art and craft and technology.
And words
So
and
yeah, yeah. So that's, more of my 2 cents worth.
well, and I think it would be great if the collections can become a museum and not be in our house. That was
Sure, sure.
right.
But if your collection fits in the place that you have available for it
Mm.
and gives you joy on a daily basis,
And doesn't hinder your movement or your
doesn't hinder your
functionality.
movement, doesn't cost you more in effort, and money to maintain than you can afford,
Mm-hmm.
then you should have it.
Right.
And he says, get rid of all your collections because that's what museums are for. And
Okay.
not sure.
But I think that there's also you can still apply the volume reduction concept to collections because we sort of collect in a fever and then we end up with pieces that aren't the best options, and so we end up with more volume to manage that, and we can refine the collection to fit and to be more manageable, to be less of a hassle and to take up less space, by filtering that collection a little bit and going back and being a curator of your own collection
Yeah.
and reduce the volume a little bit.
Okay, I'm going to go through a few more comments on in answer to when you hear the word minimalism and what do you think of? Um, and then we'll go on to the last question. I want to leave plenty of time for the last question. Jesse says, it is so extreme. I wonder if this just isn't an OCD expression like hoarding. Selena says, I think of all the single guys with just a few blank looking pieces of clothing and a high-end laptop in a blank IKEA room on an uncomfortable chair working remotely, telling people with families and or with crafty hobbies and or with limited income how to live their lives. No thanks. Cynthia says, I think of just having one bowl per person and having to wash everything right after you use it. I think that America's idea of minimalism is more of a style aesthetic than true bare bones Japanese minimalism.
It might
And
be.
and C says, sounds like you need very little belongings to be minimalist, empty spaces. I believe you don't have to get rid of everything, just have enough of what you love and enjoy while being able to maintain without sacrificing happiness and freedom.
That's a perfect summary. See, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, question 5 was, okay, the things you own end up owning you. To what extent do you agree or disagree with a statement? How is it relevant to your stuff? And this quotation is from the novel Fight Club by Chuck Palahniuk and was quoted by Fumio Sasaki in Goodbye Things. Catherine says, my time, energy, and finances get pulled into maintaining things. Is that how I really want to spend my life?
I think that's exactly the point. Do you really want to spend your time and attention managing all of your stuff? It's not the most rewarding way to spend your time. So rather than acquire and then ignore something, why not release it and stop acquiring more things that you're going to ignore later? Spend your time where you feel the most benefit and the most happy. And if that's not maintaining stuff, then getting getting your possessions down to a volume that you're happy to maintain and getting some of your time and energy back to spend on things that you find more rewarding, I think is totally the point of this book.
Cynthia says, I think that things can own you if they're not useful or enjoyable to you in your life. My bed is valuable to me. I do not mind washing my sheets and making my bed with a cotton quilt in a design that I love.
Of course. That is totally, I think that's exactly the point. Like you end up with the things that make you feel happy, and you don't have to keep things around you that don't feel useful or enjoyable to you. And if they're sitting in the corner and they're covered with dust, they're probably not being useful to you, and you're probably not enjoying them in part of your current life. And so keep the bed, get the extra towel, and
Right?
release some of the other stuff that you don't need.
Rowan says, I totally agree. Even though I have always had far less stuff than anyone else I know, in the past, the volume was still a burden, especially to the friends and acquaintances I got to help me move. I feel particularly bad about that. I had not thought to examine my assumption that everyone loves to help people as I do. But for anyone who's reading this, please do not think I am living with any material deprivation. I have plenty of clothes and bedding to keep me warm, wonderful books to read, computers to watch, TV/movies and useful videos, lectures, audiobooks, etc.
And you've reached the level of volume that feels like enough to you. Your belongings support your life and they don't feel like a burden to you. And I think everyone would appreciate feeling that way about their surroundings. I think Rowan has been aiming towards getting to a volume of stuff that feels like easy for her, supports her life, makes her happy. And I would say she probably has arrived there and feels comfortable about what she's done. And that's great. And I think she has more than Mr. Sasaki has,
Right?
but she has less than I have, for instance. And she is happy with she's reduced the volume to a place where it feels comfortable to her. And I think that's everybody's goal. That's the target we're aiming for everyone who is feeling overwhelmed by their space and their surroundings and their belongings. The overwhelmed feeling is not the place you want to be living. You want to be living in a place of comfort and support. And so we're all about trying to get you past overwhelm and get your stuff down to a volume that feels good to you instead.
Well, all right, we are out of time, and this has been a blast. I could talk about books all day, every day. And thank you again to Rowan for suggesting this book. I am working right now on the book club page for the Clutter Fairy website, and I'll announce that when it's ready for you to look at. And it's going to have. Oh, I'm going to mention right now. It will list the next book we're going to read, which will be Dana K. White's Decluttering at the Speed of Life. We're going to talk about that one on June. What did I say, Gail? June 3rd? I think it's June 3rd. We'll announce.
Yes, and I know that we have a few months now. We're trying to give you the early warning again so that
Yeah.
you can get the book and you can start leisurely making your way through it. And so I'm sure some of you have already read that book, so then it'll just be a time to revisit something you're familiar with. But it's a good one, and people in the Zoom chat often and in our comments chime in with Dana K. White's book
Yeah.
excerpts occasionally. So
Yeah.
we know that it's a popular one and that lots of you have already touched on it. So
And
we're looking forward to another good discussion.
and the book club page will have links to where you can buy the books if you need to buy them. We, of course, heartily endorse the idea of getting them out of the library if you can, and you've got 3 months, so you might be able to pull that off.
Or getting
Um,
the audio book or the digital version so you don't have to have
right.
a new object in the house.
Right. And the book club page the links will be affiliate links so that, if you buy it through our website, we'll get a teeny tiny little commission. So,
A teeny tiny
we
little
would appreciate
commission,
that if you can do it.
right?
Um, let's see. Okay. So, we also have, I'm sorry, we have a special announcement this week too. We want to say a special thank you to Lisa for becoming our newest Patreon supporter.
Hi, Lisa. Thank you so much. We appreciate you so much.
If you'd like to help support our efforts with a recurring monthly donation, please visit cfhou.com/Patreon. Your contributions help us offset the costs of producing the weekly webcast and more. Thank you for your support, Lisa, and all our generous underwriters. Okay, let's see. We will be back next week at the usual time, and I'm glad that our international audience managed to show up in
To catch on.
good numbers since we are out of sync with the
Right.
rest of the world. The United States is on daylight saving time already. Next week, we're going to take on several short topics suggested by viewers and listeners, including a segment on unconventional places to take donations. Thank you to Christine for that topic suggestion. So join us on March 18th for Give Stuff Away Through Creative Donation, plus more short topics. Gayle, why don't you give us the tittle?
Okay, this week's weekly tittle is Imagine Starting Over from Scratch. This week's assignment is a thought experiment based on a passage from the book Goodbye Things, The New Japanese Minimalism. Consider the following quote from the book. In a thought-provoking documentary film called My Stuff, the protagonist takes all of his belongings, puts them in storage, and allows himself to retrieve only one item each day. On the first day, he really does have nothing on him. He runs to the storage unit wearing nothing but a newspaper to hide his private parts. He retrieves a coat on the first day and sleeps on the hard floor. Love that visual so much. And I love that, he went and got a coat so that he would be covered and, not be naked in the streets, and he would have something to sleep on, which I thought was, a good place to start. So imagine yourself in this situation that the author describes. Everything you own is in storage except the one set of clothing that you're wearing, because we decided to let you have some clothes. And then take a sheet of paper and write the numbers 1 through 15 in a column down the left side. Next to each number, write down the item that you would retrieve from storage on each day of your 2-week minimalist experience. For example, day 1, blanket, day 2, pillow. If you're feeling ambitious, play out the thought experiment up to 30 items or 50 items or 100. Reflect on anything surprising that you've learned as you've thought about how little you could live with or how much you could live without. And then come back and tell us about it. I'm really curious to see what makes the top 15 lists, like the top 15 most important things. What would you grab? And, my image of running to the storage unit with newspapers wrapped around me was like, oh no, first up, I'm putting on underwear. I'm sorry. I'm walking back out of there with underwear on. That's my first day grab. So
we should probably add, let's just take it as a given that your family members, including your pets, are not in the storage unit. You get to have those. You get to have those already.
Your family, yes.
No, right, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like you don't have to say on day 1 I would go get my husband.
Right, exactly.
Okay, if you're watching this on YouTube, we'd love for you to join us live. To get notifications about upcoming events, we invite you to join the meetup group by visiting cfhou.com/meetup. You can also follow us on Facebook by visiting cfhou.com/Facebook, or join our mailing list by visiting cfhou.com/subscribe. We love to hear from you, so please keep your questions, comments, and topic suggestions coming on YouTube, Facebook, or anywhere that you find us. You can always reach us through the website at clutterfairyhouston.com.
Thanks to Fumio Sasaki for an interesting walk through his life and an interesting book for us to study. Thanks to Rowan for the suggestion. And thanks to you guys for actually reading the book and writing comments in our surveys. We're so appreciative that you participated, and we gave you homework and you went and did it. And we're so thrilled that you were able to do that and you went on this journey with us. So thank you so much. And we look forward to circling back to a new book again in June. And otherwise, we will see you next week. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye-bye.